All right, guys, today we are taking a look at the Boston Tea Party. This is, again, one of those pivotal events. It's one that everybody knows about, or at least thinks they know about. And we're seeing a continued escalation between, or escalation of the tensions between the colonist and the British Empire and the agents of the British Empire, those soldiers who are in our midst. So this is really a very famous one. Let's go ahead and get started here. What we're going to see is that tension between the British and their American colonists are running incredibly high. They have been for some while. Right in the aftermath of the 7 Years' War, we were one big happy family. But that's also when we started to recognize some of the differences between us and differences in the way that we see one another, right? Once we realized that they were going to always see us as subservient, they were never going to see us as equals. They were always going to see us as kind of a means to an end in terms of boosting their economy, creating jobs there, rather than something that had to be dealt with seriously as a growing part of the world, a growing population. They're denying representation, all that kind of stuff leads to this major rift. And so we realize very quickly that the British are not going to ever see us as equals, not going to treat us fairly. And from that point forward, these tensions just year after year escalate with every single action that the British take, every single law that requires more out of us, every single tax they pass on us but don't collect from others. Those tensions begin to rise. So, what we will see is that add to that anger from lack of representation, from higher taxes, from unfair taxes, from quartering troops in our midst, and royal interference, there's a lot of reason for these colonists to be angry. Um, Now, what we're going to see is the British did uh, make a few changes. They got rid of a few of the taxes, but the British continued to tax that very important, that seems weird to say, right? That very important product. But it was a daily staple, right? Can you imagine what would happen if all of a sudden the government began to restrict or highly tax coffee, right? You'd have a lot of really grumpy, pissed off people. And tea was kind of like that in that day and age. It was a daily product that people used and loved, and it was a major part of their life. And so high taxes on that was um, just one more thing that the government was doing that kind of highlighted their power over the people and their lack of understanding about who the people were and what they wanted, what they really needed. So tea is really was an important product in that time. This is our old friend Samuel Adams, right? And again, he led the Sons of Liberty. They kind of come up with this plan to protest that Tea Act in a very visible and very tangible way. And it's really kind of funny because the reality is we all know a little bit about the Boston Tea Party. This sounds like it's a drunken fraternity prank, right? A bunch of guys get together at a bar. And by the way, that bar is called the Green Dragon. It still exists today, and you can still go visit it. It's great. I've been there. Fascinating history. But it was kind of the unofficial headquarters of the Sons of Liberty, right? They gathered there often. So they kind of hatched this plan, right? Again, like a drunken fraternity prank. Hey, let's go. Let's take our shirts off, pretend to be Native Americans. We'll put some war paint and feathers on, and we'll run down to the ship in the harbor. It's full of tea, and we're going to just chuck it into the sea, right? I think a lot of times it's depicted as having happened at night. That's not really the case, right? It happens in broad daylight. So I don't know. These are well-known people. They're people about town, and so I can just imagine, them getting themselves all psyched up, ready to go, running down the street because it wasn't exactly nearby. It wasn't next door, right? So they're running through the streets. People are like, "There goes Sam. There's John, right? Just running by. They're recognizable. It's happening in broad daylight." So here we see again a pretty famous depiction, and one that actually gets it right because it's taking place in daytime. And there they are dressed as Native Americans. What they throw into the harbor there was 90,000 pounds of tea. 90,000 pounds. That now this sounds like we're talking about drugs, right? Had a street value of $1 million. But Had it been split up the way that it normally was and distributed in the colonies, it would have been $1 million value at that time. $1 million then, right? Today, it would have been so much more than that, but it represents a significant value that's lost to the company that shipped it, to the company that grew the tea and processed it, and also a significant loss of revenue collected in taxes for the sale of that tea. So this is kind of a pretty bold plan, a bold approach to things. The king is furious. He sees this as just an absolute slap in the face and decides that it's time, right? It's time that these colonists, he feels like he's put up with a lot. He's allowed them to show their displeasure. Now, nothing has changed, right? They still don't have representation. They're still being taxed unfairly. There's still a lot of government interference, but he feels like he's kind of put up with this as long as he really has to. And now it's time for them to learn their place. They look at the colonies as being kind of petulant children throwing a tantrum over some inconsequential thing. Obviously, we saw it differently, right? But the king is now going to focus his full anger, his full wrath on putting us in our place. So this story is not over. That's a little bit about the Boston Tea Party. But the reality is, this story is not over. It's just beginning. You know the Newton's laws of physics, right? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So this is our protest against the tea. So the tea tax is the first action. We protest against the tea tax. Really, probably a little bit of an escalation on our part. Well, now the king is furious and he's going to escalate even further. We'll see that in the next video about what we call the intolerable acts or the coercive acts. It's very, very important. Please tune in and make sure you watch it. Subscribe to the channel so that you can see all the updates and the new videos that are being pushed out. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.